Well, last night I said that the only two things that you can be guaranteed from so-called political leaders these days are confusion and fear. Well, we can now add to confusion and fear anger. It is deep-seated. I'm saying to you that the whole response to coronavirus is now completely out of control. Government leaders are rattled. They're sniping at one another. They can't live by their own rules. Berejiklian told us that Sydney had to lock down to contain the coronavirus, so Sydney locked down. And the numbers went up. So she then increased the lockdown, even though it didn't work in the first place. The virus is too smart for these premiers who continue to ignore international evidence, which I'll look at later. But as Peter Fennick from East Melbourne writes accurately today, and this is what disturbs me, and this should shame all politicians, Peter wrote, quote, "It's the young whose lives have been scarred forever by the lies and the incompetence," unquote. Britain are enjoying their Freedom Day. The case numbers, since that's all that gets thrown at us, the case numbers in Britain topped 54,000. But 62% of Britons are fully vaccinated. So what's that say of the relationship between the Delta virus and vaccination? Remember, 54,000 cases a day is equal to 5,400 cases in Victoria in a day and 6,600 in New South Wales. How many have we had here? 78 cases out of 62,860 tests, 0.12%, or 99.88% tested negative. Victoria, 13 cases out of 49,450 tests. That equals to 0.02% testing positive or 99.98% negative. South Australia's now got into lockdown. 5 cases, 6 o'clock tonight. For 7 days, 5 cases, 1 in hospital. When in God's name or in the name of anyone is some sanity going to prevail? But why wouldn't they lock down? Scott Morrison has said everyone will be funded. Where the hell is this money coming from? We mightn't pay for the tests when we get them. We mightn't pay for the vaccine when we get it. But these alone, tests and vaccines, are costing the taxpayer hundreds of millions of dollars, and you and I are paying. The taxpayer, the kids of tomorrow. While lunatic leaders in New South Wales shut down a whole industry, the construction industry. When is some sanity going to enter into any of this? There are already strict protocols and protections on all the major construction sites. Workers from the current hotspots are tested every 3 days at God knows what cost. If compliance is an issue, then health should do its job. And Perrottet and Barilaro and Ayres in New South Wales and the other people in the New South Wales government with half a spine stand up to Gladys Berejiklian and tell her to wake up, call the dogs off, put the construction industry back to work. Even Victoria doesn't shut down construction during lockdowns. And this chief health officer has said she didn't have the expertise to determine which industries should be targeted, but it wasn't her decision. Berejiklian says they're locked down because, quote, thousands and thousands of people are moving around. What? Gladys, just as you were when you went for a coffee at the weekend while telling everyone else to stay at home? And Brad Hazzard, the health minister, says, we've got no business questioning Berejiklian's private life. Private life? Gladys Berejiklian was unmasked, taking coffee in a public space amongst other citizens. The reality is neither Berejiklian, nor Hazzard, nor Chant, or any of them could pass a test if you ask them what the health orders were. Where did all this begin? An unvaccinated limo driver who was transporting international aircrew. Recommendations have been made about masking and vaccination, but nothing was mandatory at the time. And here we are now in this shambles. And then today, another laughable press conference. Gladys Berejiklian took her early dose of alarmism. Listen to this.
I just want to really stress to people, all of us have to be on our guard.
All of us have got to be on our guard. And then buoyantly, she said,
nearly 6,000 businesses had their applications processed for support.
Yes, Premier, that's nothing to boast about. It is an acknowledgement that 6,000 businesses have been betrayed by your Liberal Party on their knees due to your government's edicts. And what about this Dr. Chant?
We have to stop the spread of COVID. To do this, We all need to work together.
I thought only Joe Biden was in cognitive decline. Does this highly paid person, Dr. Chan, seriously suggest she knows how to eradicate a virus? But she too had her daily dose of alarmism. Listen to this rubbish.
Even if you run into your next door neighbour in the shopping centre, in the Coles, whilst you're at Coles, Woolworths or Aldi or any other grocery shop, don't start up a conversation. Now is the time for minimising your interactions with others. Even if you've got a mask, do not think that affords total protection.
Are we being run by lunatics? Don't start up a conversation. Even if you have a mask, please know that it doesn't give you total protection. Well, why are you telling us to wear masks everywhere, indoors and outdoors, and you're fined if you don't wear them properly? The piece of cloth that you dragged off the back seat or out of the glove box or out of your handbag in the name of a mask. And by the way, it's the same mask you've most probably worn for the last 10 days. Oh, yeah, I tell you what, we're really into public health here in New South Wales. And what about the fact that you're only allowed to involve yourself in essential work, but no one can define essential? So, what does Dr. Kerry Chant say?
And probably you need a new word other than essential.
We probably need a new word other than essential. No, Kerry Chant, we need new people in charge with just a dram of common sense. And you sure as hell don't qualify. But as I've said, every day we get the dose of alarmism and hysteria. On the front page of today's Daily Telegraph, the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, is dubbed Health Hazard. Well, a hazard is a risk. And what this bloke is saying represents an unacceptable risk to public well-being. Listen to this.
This virus is an extremely transmissible virus. It can kill you and it can kill your family and your friends.
Can kill your family and friends. How's that for hope? And then listen to this advice.
Dismiss the ideas that aren't based in science or medicine. Don't listen to some of these crazy messages that are coming out implying that this is not a dangerous virus.
You mean to say what you're saying is based on science and medicine? Where is the science that suggests all those initiatives that have been taken are valid? Whether it's lockdowns, whether it's social distancing, whether it's masks. As I've suggested many times, there are some world authorities who argue that even though the Delta strain is more transmissible, it is weaker than all the others. And witness the hospitalisation and death figures. This is alarmist nonsense. And don't you like this? With half of Australia shut down and people out of work and out of money, this Dr. Chant says this.
We just have to make these sacrifices at this time.
We just have to make these sacrifices at this time. Dr. Chant, what sacrifice have you made with your salary? Or do you mean that you have to make sacrifices but not the political and bureaucratic class? Chant is asked the perfectly legitimate question. How many of the 78 new cases were cases from the workplace since you're shutting the workplace down? Listen to the answer.
I'll get you that information.
I'll get you those figures. This is the same Chant who the other week had no idea how many of those hospitalised with COVID had been vaccinated. It is valid to ask, what does she know? And here's Gladys Berejiklian again on full salary.
We're grateful for the feedback. We understand the impacts it's causing on the broader economy.
Gladys, are you kidding? We understand the impact this is going to have on the broader economy? Come on. You're talking about the construction industry? You claim to understand, but you continue to bash up the tradies? This is sickening in its insensitivity. We don't deserve to be governed by people like this. And what about this from the Premier of New South Wales?
No matter what your circumstances are, reduce your mobility.
No matter what your circumstances are, reduce your mobility? I beg your pardon, Premier? Gladys, you were out on Sunday morning grabbing coffee. Is that reducing your mobility? Or have words lost their meaning? Again, she said,
It's just a very simple message. Do not leave the house unless you absolutely have to. Don't engage in social interaction.
What? Don't leave the house? There's lectures unless you absolutely have to. It's a very simple message. Don't leave the house unless you absolutely have to. Don't engage in social interaction. I beg your pardon? Do you suffer, Premier, from a bad memory? Coffee on Sunday with someone and don't engage in social interactions? There is barely a question that the Chief Medical Officer can answer, Dr. Chant, but the Premier was asked, why has the construction industry been given a promise that they'll return back on July 31, but not schools or restaurants or retail or other businesses? Listen to this response.
If Dr. Chant tells us it's safe to have face-to-face learning come back on the 2nd of August, we will do that.
If Dr. Chant tells us it's safe to have face-to-face learning on August 1, then we will do that. This is the same Dr. Chant who said she didn't have expertise to determine which industries should be targeted before the construction industry was shut down. And there is no consistent international epidemiological evidence that they can rely on to close schools. But with the Olympics coming up, Gladys today won the gold medal in alarmism. At the SCARE conference, this is what she said.
People who are quite healthy in the morning could be on a ventilator by the evening.
Oh, people who are quite healthy and people are listening to this at home. This is disgraceful, isn't it? They could be on a ventilator in the evening. Gladys, just admit you're out of your depth, you've lost control, you're rattled and you're making it up as you go along. Move over and move on. We deserve better than these primary school responses to devastating circumstances that you have created. What do you think? Email me, alan@skynews.com.au or the text line 0414 000 848.